Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I'm your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful afternoon. Today is, Tuesday, December 9th, 2025, and we are live. And welcome back to every single one of you who are joining me for this live stream. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out to be able to reach more people, to inspire, encourage, and activate. So I appreciate it from you very much. Also, if you would like to, you also can subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. Gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. You have that there. And also, if you guys would like to, you guys can also submit any videos you would like for me to react to, or have any questions that you would like me to video react to. You guys can always submit that through QBounty at qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt. So thank you very much there. Just to let you guys know, a blanket hello to everybody that's joining in, as whenever I have a guest, I like to be very respectful of their time. Just a few things we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about this later in the show today. One of the things we're going to talk about is Monsters, Inc. We're going to be discussing this because this is a very powerful image that has just showed up online, really that shows depravity of many people, especially the people who are supremacist, here in the United States, as well as in the Zionist occupation, also known as Israel. We're also going to be talking a little bit later about why I think what's going on in Spain is suspicious, and this is why. And you'll find out, if you don't know who that gentleman is, then you guys will find out who he is. We're going to be discussing that a little bit later. But first, we're going to be having a discussion with Mr. Blake Ashby. We're going to be talking about the best path forward, and we will be talking about basically a response to something I tweeted out, and I can't wait to have that as well, to have this discussion. So I have Mr. Blake Ashby joining me. So good to have you finally on the channel, and nice to have this discussion with you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Ashby, one of the things that I would like to begin with is what sparked this conversation. This conversation is something that I think that many people have been having online and many different podcasts and things like that. So I just want to go into what the birthplace of this is. And so then we can set more of like context and ground to show people exactly why we're having this conversation. So I'm going to be sharing this on X, and this was a tweet from you responding to me. And in my response, in my initial statements, I was actually quote tweeting from a tweet that talks that was the discussion about Zohran Mamdani. It says, in an exclusive sit-down visit, says not the right time for Osechi to challenge Representative Jeffries. And so I actually said that, what did I say? Where are the left organizations in New York City? If you don't hold his feet to the fire before he's sworn in, then y'all are going to look like a joke, prove us wrong. Then Mr. Ashby responded and says the problem is that the far left convinced themselves that Mamdani was something other than what he was, which is a pragmatist. When he said the middle of the road things during the campaign, a few talked themselves into believing he was just moderating his language to get elected. And then I also said that I wrote my article about not trusting Zohran Mamdani. And then you said that I should have you on my show. You said you're a red state Democrat and a minor party leader from all places, Ferguson, Missouri. I think we have a lively conversation. And so because of this, then now you are here.
Yeah,
thank you very much. Welcome. So just the question is, in what way did you mean that many of us were, do you feel like we were attributing more to Zohran Mamdani than we thought he was letting on?
Yeah, and so it's a tough thing, right? And almost the starting point has to be, what is the definition of socialism? And, people my generation, I got lots of gray hair, right? We have kind of a binary definition of that's, literally goes back 100 years. And so we have viewed socialism as state socialism, the Soviet Union. It's worth noting that a younger generation actually has a more technical definition of socialism. If socialism technically is ownership or is a state control of the means of production, right? We typically think of factories and farms and things like that, but young people point out that roads are part of the means of production, and education is part of the means of production. And so it's not a binary. It's not either capitalism or socialism. More accurately, it's a blend of private responsibilities and public responsibilities. And we do need to do a better job of understanding those public responsibilities. So for Mamdani, he was running to be mayor of New York. He was not running for president, not running for autocrat. He was running for a very specific purpose with a very specific role and a very specific set of possibilities. He has no ability to socialize anything. He does have the ability to move the line between public responsibility and private responsibility, and hopefully do a better job on the public responsibility. So my point was that people on the left have this grand vision of revolution, when really he was somebody in the middle in a very constrained position who was trying to make things a little bit better within the parameters of what he was allowed as mayor of New York.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So, and I'm glad that you didn't generalize everybody on the left. One of the things that I think is important is that you have some that may be overtly idealist in their thinking in response to people like Zohran Mamdani. These tend to be more of, from what it seems like to me, the social democrats, the people who think that somebody within the Democratic Party can actually reform anything. I am not one of those people. I am a communist, and so therefore I do not believe that any type of reform can come through the Democratic Party at all. My critiques of people like Zohran Mamdani is that, yes, he's running within the system, but at the same time, I also I reserve a lot of hesitancy when it comes to people like him, because he's running within the system that really will not necessitate any real change for the working class people. It's really just managing the chaos. And so for somebody like myself, when I look at somebody like him, I don't trust him because I don't trust either party.
Well, you don't trust the system, right?
I don't trust the party, either party. I don't trust the system.
Yeah.
I don't trust the economic system that we're under. I see that it has not done us any good, at least within the last 40 years or within my lifetime.
Yeah.
I think it had this apex really up into the 60s. And then once it reaches apex, then it was a downward from there. And I think it's time for a new economic system that benefits the workers beyond capitalism.
Sure. Yeah, and fair points. Hey, just a little bit of definitional housekeeping. When you say communist, what do you mean by that?
I believe that the workers, the proletariat, the people should collectively own all centers of what is considered to be public good within things like education, healthcare, housing, when it comes to protecting ourselves, protecting the environment. And so I believe that socialism is the vehicle towards that, but it is not the end all be all. And so socialism.
What separates socialism from communism?
Socialism is the vehicle to get there versus communism is the destination. It's just like your car is not California, but your car is the vehicle that you use to get to California if you're driving, right?
But what differentiates the two? I understand that one is, and Karl Marx said the same thing, right? That it was a progression from capitalism to socialism to communism. Mm-hmm. But he had a very specific list of things that differentiated socialism from communism. What are your differentiators?
My differentiations are that the workers will finally get to a point where the productive forces are determined not necessarily by capital and earning, but I would like to get back to essentially what the indigenous had was, I think, called more like a gift economy. And so not having influence of, money and politics, not having influence of finance in order to be able to achieve having a decent standard of living.
Yeah.
I feel like pretty much everything that we receive from this planet is free. We just have to work together in order to be able to achieve it collectively, instead of it being achieved through a small group of people owning everything, and then we are actually enriching the small group of people at the top.
Yep, no, that's a fairly good definition, actually. So if you go back to Marx, right, he thought that socialism would follow capitalism, but because of the period of capitalism, the workers, the people, they still had the habits of capitalism. They still had the habits of fear of need, and they still had the habits of greed. And so a period of socialism would be necessary to deal with those habits. But eventually the habits of capitalism would fade away, and we would get back to that more communalistic state that you just mentioned, right? And so really the differentiator between socialism and communism is that under socialism, you still need a coercive state to make sure that people contribute their labor and don't take too much. At some point, because people have lost those bad habits of capitalism, the state can wither away and you have communism. So you have people doing good, doing their part, so to each his ability, to each his needs, down the road. But so the challenge of what you just talked about is, and I've actually written a book, Capitalism and Socialism, the Democratic Party. I'm in the process of looking for a publisher. There are these fantasies about socialism that do not stand economic scrutiny. And that really is the biggest challenge, is that there is this assumption that there is something other than capitalism. But really what we're talking about is industrialism. And the ownership relationship is a small part of that overall picture. And so I had actually written something, I don't know if I sent it to you or not, but years ago in the 1930s, there was kind of a battle between socialism on the one side and unregulated capitalism on the other side. And we picked a middle path. We picked moderated capitalism. We stuck with the free market, but we used the power of democracy to make sure that everybody had a chance to participate, had a chance to benefit, and played by the same set of rules. Okay. And we lived by that until, as you know, 1970s. With the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a rise of triumphant capitalism and the idea that we could undo the regulatory state. And that's when things started getting bad. And to borrow a line from Hemingway, it happened two ways: gradually, then suddenly. So we had 40 years of gradually, and now we have the suddenly. So you're right that people your generation have never experienced moderated capitalism, but that doesn't make socialism any more viable of an opportunity or of an option, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, from what it sounds like, you're trying to get to more what you would consider to be more social democracy, correct?
It's the people get caught up in the definitions, but that is certainly an adequate definition, right? It would be, if you talk to people in Scandinavia, they never say they're socialist countries. They say they're social democracies, okay, free market with a safety net, regulatory free market. So yes, that's as good a term as any.
Okay. So my issue with going towards a social democracy is that what the problem with social democracies, especially within the ones in Europe, is that they were able to achieve what they were able to achieve not by just their own, by their own volition, but they were able to achieve it through really exploiting the global South in order to be able to have the achievements that they have. You can look at, like, for instance, what happens in places like Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, where, the gold reserves in Mali were financing France. You have Niger that has the uranium that powers the nuclear reactors in France. And yet, places like Niger, their amount of electricity is wholly inadequate. And so imperialism has honestly ravaged the global South to the point where they are unable to bring themselves up, even though they're the ones with the resources. And so it's like what Michael Parenti said. He said there's no such thing as a poor country; they're just overly exploited. And so, unfortunately, even if you have reins on capitalism will just shake those reins off eventually, just like what they did with the New Deal. The New Deal was really just a way to put guardrails on capitalism. And because of those guardrails that were placed there, Then those guardrails were eventually taken away because the capitalistic forces were able to influence our our political officials into peeling back whatever gains that we have. And so now we're at the point where we are actually coming up into a worse position than even we were during the Great Depression. I mean, look at the housing and, the cost of living crisis that we're in right now. In the real economy, people are really suffering now, despite whatever the stock market says.
Yeah, no, all fair points, right? And to your point, capital will always push back against the guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
And, people in my generation, right? I'm 61 years old. What in your generation that messed it up? I'm guessing, but 30s? How old are you?
I'm 41.
Okay. I was going to say 30s, early 40s, right? So you weren't alive when the bad stuff it's on my generation, right? Because as you say, we had the guardrails in place. Capital pushed back. Instead of protecting the guardrails, part of the Democratic Party bought into triumphant capitalism. They bought into the idea that because we had matured, we no longer needed government protections. We no longer needed a government to make sure that everybody had a chance to participate.
Mm-hmm.
But so, in my opinion, the answer is we need to get back to those guardrails because there is no other alternative. And that really is the key. As long as we think that this, and no disrespect, right, but this fantasy of socialism is possible, we won't focus on fixing capitalism. We'll think there's something else. And in a way, it gives young people a chance to sit idly by and say, oh, well, not my responsibility. I'm going to wait for it to collapse and not try and fix it. We need young people to engage with fixing the system we have and not pretend that they can wait for this to collapse and the next one will be better.
My question to you then, okay, so let's say hypothetically we get to that point back to where we have the guardrails. What is next?
Got to maintain it, right? Government is it's not a destination, it's a process. And the challenge over and over again, as you say, right, capital will always push back against restraints. That's the nature of capital. Once we get back to those guardrails, we have to make sure we maintain those guardrails. And that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. But that really has to be the goal. And I can explain to you why socialism won't work, but it's a tedious conversation, right? But if you look at, there are different ways of slicing and dicing socialism. One of the ways you can look at it there are three kinds. There is systemic socialism, where the whole system is socialist. There's sector socialism, where, for instance, just the steel industry is socialist, and then there is enterprise socialism. All of those approaches have been tried. They have all failed miserably. And they didn't fail because the United States was, pushing back against the Soviet Union. They failed because if you look at the writings of Karl Marx, they do not stand scrutiny. Karl Marx spent a lot more time talking about capitalism than he did socialism. If you take his science, and this is one of our challenges, right, is that every philosopher has a little bit of science and a little bit of religion. With most, we toss out the religion and keep the science. With Marx, we tossed out the science and we kept the religion. But the science of Marx says that those three versions of socialism will not be able to match the productive output of the private market, of capitalism. So there's a mouthful.
So let me ask this. What further? So my question being, if it hasn't worked, then why do we have some countries that are socialist, that despite whatever the United States is doing, they still exist today? But the only reason why they are struggling is because of the sanctions, embargoes, and fight that the United States and the collective West put up against it. And they still managed to survive despite it.
But see, I'm not sure, so China didn't move away from socialism because of the military threats from the United States. They moved away from socialism because socialism wasn't producing the value, the wealth that the economy needed. And other than Cuba, what in your opinion, what is the most socialist country? Maybe Venezuela, but what is the most socialist country left in the world?
Probably DPRK. North Korea.
North Korea. Okay. North Korea is a miserable place. People hate it. It has no personal freedoms. And we actually don't know how bad things are because they won't let us in. When people manage to escape, they say that prosperity is actually a fraud. And, literally they have people buy goods. When the cameras come, they have people buy goods and then take them around back and bring them back so they've got more goods to sell. North Korea is a terrible example of a socialist country, in my opinion. So what would be a different example that's not quite so repressive?
North Korea is a terrible example. Okay.
Well, would you like to live in North Korea?
I think it'd be cool.
Yeah. The people that are in North Korea are doing their best to get out uniformly.
No, actually, they actually get out by the thousands, the hundreds of thousands. The problem is that they can't come here to the West because of the sanctions that they have in place, they won't allow them to be able to use their visas, not visas, but their passports to be able to come here. So a lot of times they do travel. They go to places like China actually quite a bit. So they're actually able to travel in and out of the country. The problem is that the United States put so many sanctions and blockades on places like North Korea that they really can't even come here.
I agree. It would make it harder for North Koreans to come here, but I think you're overestimating just how much freedom of movement North Koreans have. So you're saying hundreds of thousands go on vacations to Europe. They go on vacations to Saudi Arabia. You're saying right now people can come and go at will in North Korea.
Yeah.
All right. I don't think that matches up with the most people's understanding of how the country operates.
Most people, who's most people?
Anybody from the government of North Korea. Has the government of North Korea said that people are free to leave if they want?
Yeah, they allow them to go.
Yeah.
The problem is that really, because the thing is, you're I think a lot of people, they trust what the West says about a certain place versus instead of actually going and getting primary sources from other places outside of the West. And a lot of times we end up listening to them and we trust what the West says. And if the West has lied to us about Iran, they lied to us about Nicaragua, they lied to us about Cuba, they lied to us about Chile, what makes you think that they're not lying about places like DPRK or Cuba or Venezuela or even Russia? I mean, my thing is, it's like if I have a partner and they keep, cheating on me, serial cheating on me, and then next thing you know, they're like, oh man, even though I was naked with that person, it didn't really mean anything, and it's not what it looks like. It's like, do I look like Boo Boo the Fool? It doesn't make sense.
But let's take those in order, right? So Chile, right? So 1973 was it the Allende government? In 1973, the CIA helped overthrow a democratically elected socialist leading government, right?
Yeah,
that was 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that time, what has the United States done that has kept them from leading their own lives?
I mean, the United States has done regime change after regime change and actually put in their own puppets. What they tried to do in Venezuela. They tried to put in Maria Corina Machado in order to be able to take over the Venezuelan government in order to make sure that Maduro doesn't become president again. So, I mean, the United States does this all the time.
I understand. In Chile, what else have they done in Chile? I understand, with there 188 countries in the world, something like that. In Chile, what have they done that has kept that country from deciding its own path?
The CIA is a thing. I mean, the United States does intervene in all these countries in order to make sure that they don't. And on top of that, if they don't, if they're able to achieve anything, you have sanctions and blockades and all these different things that also prevent these countries from actually moving forward as well. So,
but even
it's not just a one-off. It's basically these countries are trying, but the problem is that in order to be able to compete on the world stage, I mean, we literally have, the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So they kind of have to play ball, but at the same time, even when they're trying not to, the United States punishes them for trying to go into a different direction.
Yes and no, and sometimes I'm not disagreeing. But going back to the Soviet Union didn't fail because the United States would not sell it high-end military electronics. The Soviet Union failed because its model could not produce the wealth to keep its people satisfied. It really was a revolution in the Soviet Union. The people that had actually lived through state socialism found it to be lacking in one of the different systems. And that has happened over and over again. The countries that have actually tried full-bore socialism, the people, not the United States, the people in the country have found them to be lacking, and they have moved away from that system. Even Great Britain moved away from nationalization of steel. The Scandinavian countries, they privatized the few things that the government did own. Over and over again, we come back to private ownership is the model, private ownership with moderation. And I recognize what you're saying about predatory capitalism, but moderated capitalism is the model that virtually every country has moved toward.
And yet we still have the issues that we have now.
Oh yeah, no, and so part of this, and and you're right. You mentioned imperialism, right? So part of this is that we've got a philosophic belief in a system of government, and in the equality of human beings, right? In theory, our country was based on this idea of the equality of human beings. In actual practice, it's been a slowly expanding circle of freedom, and there are many people who were not included in that circle, especially early on, less so now, but even still. And so same thing, one of the challenges with the global South is that we essentially put in place colonial capitalism. We did not give them the ability to govern their country. And the one thing we didn't export was liberalism and the belief in the individual. And so a lot of these countries, they've got the worst of it. They've got a colonial capitalist system without a belief in individual freedom. And that means they tend to default to government by groups, and government by groups has historically wound up being oppressive of the outgroups.
So what's the difference between colonial capitalism and capitalism?
So colonial capitalism is, as you say, right, it's extractive. So it was a model put on top of existing, a lot of these societies weren't feudal, right, but they weren't industrial. It was a model put on non-industrial societies for the purpose of extracting resources that would have benefited industrialism. So as you say, we took over countries to get access to cobalt or to oil or to, I was going to say one more, but diamonds, for example, right? So that is colonial capitalism. Absolutely. It is a dash of imperialism because we are not there to spread the word about individual freedom. We're there to extract resources to benefit industrialism.
But isn't that just capitalism? I mean, capitalism is about who owns what, not necessarily. So by that being said, if the owners of the means of production, which is a very small group, are dictating to the government that we should go over there and take their resources, wouldn't that still just be regular plain old capitalism? It's just like if I take a potato and if I make it into potato salad au gratin or russet potatoes or any other type of potatoes, it's still potatoes at the end of the day, right? Yeah. So why are we trying to say, oh, this type of capitalism is good, but that type of capitalism is good? If I put just a little drop of poison in a cup of water, and then I say, oh, it just has a little drop of poison, it's not a full cup of poison, is it still poison water or not?
Okay, but so the challenge, though, is that we're talking about industrialism, right? So if you look at the term capital, capital has different meanings, but the primary meaning that we're talking about is the production of something not for consumption, but to allow further production. So instead of, going back to hunter-gatherer days, instead of me spending my time pulling up roots and finding the roots to eat, I take my time and I sharpen a stick and I use that stick to dig up roots. So the first capital was the first stone tool or first wood tool. So capital has existed since before recorded human history, right? And we use capital to give us a better ability to meet our needs. A person with a stick can dig up roots faster than a person with their hands. And so that is the reality of our world. Most of the surplus value that's created is created because we have added capital to that. And eventually capital reached the point with generated energy to where we had industrialism. But so you can't wish away capital. Capital is going to exist. You can, as you say, look at different ownership relations. But at the end of the day, the ownership relations that have produced by far the most wealth are letting the person that made that stick keep using that stick themselves.
But my argument isn't that capital exists. My argument is who owns the capital.
Yeah, absolutely
So,
right.
so therefore, it should be owned collectively by the people, not just by a small few, because then that small few aren't actually doing the work and being able to produce. They're also extracting the surplus labor from the people. That being said, then therefore that is exploitative. Us having capital, meaning collectively owning the capital, I'm not against that. In fact, I'm actually all for that. But the thing is that it has to be done in a democratic and collectivist fashion, or for it to be able to be utilized by the entire people as a whole, because that's how society works.
Yeah.
So,
but you keyed on something there, right? Because ownership of the means of production, but there's also control of the means of production. And so one of the reasons that socialism failed is it created this illusion that if we take away ownership of the means of production, we take away the benefits of ownership. But the benefit also accrues to control. And so in Soviet factories, and and Marx, the term Marx used was scientific socialism. He thought that we could scientifically manage the economy, take out the personal bias, take out the personal greed, but manage the economy for the good of all. But even without ownership, the people in the Soviet Union still had a benefit of controlling the means of production. And because of that, there was still competition to control the means of production, even if the ownership was this watery state, right? And so that's my point, is that if you look back to Marx and what he wrote, you can pretend that you can take away greed and that you can take away self-interest, but because management of capital is a specialization just like anything else, benefit will always accrue to the management of capital, regardless of the ownership structure. So with that as a reality, it's easier to just say, okay, well, people can not only control it, they can own it. If they do a good job, they get to control more. If they do a bad job, they lose control of it. So the problem isn't that people own things. The problem is that we've made it very hard for them to lose those things if they do a bad job of owning them.
it sounds like you're speaking about it and thinking that it's an anti-democratic thing, when in reality, the type of socialism we talk about is socially owning the means of production and basically democratically deciding on how it gets used. So and therefore, if it's democratic in how it's being used, therefore it is the people speaking for how something is used, how the capital is being used. So therefore, like for instance, if we democratically decide, okay, we're going to build roads and bridges in this area, and if the collective decides on that, then of course, then yeah, it is by majority rule. And so therefore, it's basically what the people want.
Okay, but so, you picked the easiest example, and even that one's hard, by the way. There's all sorts of controversy on where to build roads, but look at so a couple things first, right? So the labor theory of value is incorrect. The labor theory of value ascribes all of the surplus value created to the labor, when the economic reality is that in most cases, most of that surplus value can be ascribed to the capital. And because Marx refused to acknowledge the value of capital, there is no mechanism in socialism for the deployment of capital. So let me give you an example, right? This is a real world example, right? Here in St. Louis, there was something called the Black Bear Bakery. Bread is life. And a bunch of socialists, a bunch of delightful human beings. It was like 15 of them when they started. And they all got together and they started a collective, and they started a bakery. Mm-hmm. That bakery made it about 12 years before it shut down. And what happened was, it's easy to say all 15 of us should decide how to run the bakery. But at the end of the day, somebody has to be there at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning. How do you schedule that? What happens if you schedule somebody and they don't show up? Are they kicked out of the collective? What happens if one person has a personal bias for sweets and another person has a personal bias for rye bread? How do you decide what to produce, right? And there was no easy answer for Black Bear Bakery, because going back to Marx, there are only two possible relations to consumption. There is produce and consume, which is way, way back. It used to be that almost everything we consumed, we produced. But now, because of industrialism, we have an exchange economy. So there is produce and exchange. We virtually produce none of what we produce. If I work at a bakery, I might buy a loaf of bread a week. right? But there are 10,000 loaves of bread I didn't buy. If I work at an auto plant, I might buy one new car every 3 years, but there are 100,000 cars that I didn't buy. And so it gets back to who defines value. And in the economic system, the person that defines value is the person that uses it. So it didn't actually matter what the employees of Black Bear Bakery wanted to produce. What mattered most was what the customers of Black Bear Bakery wanted to buy. And so it failed because they assumed that we could collectively get together and decide how to run the business for our own interests. Businesses do not run for the interests of the employees. Businesses create surplus value by selling things to other people. And again, in our industrial world, nothing's going to change that relationship. The people at Black Bear, the 15 people, were not qualified to run Black Bear. Black Bear went out of business. And that's what's going to happen and that's happened in virtually every socialist enterprise.
I just would have got all 15 people together and said, okay, let's start asking the customers what they want. And then we collectively decide to do what the customers want.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. You can take surveys, but how do you...
But then it still would have been collective.
No, because think about how that works in the real world, right? Think about that, right? You've been to a bakery, obviously, right? And you walk in, they've got breads, they've got sweets, they've got rolls, they've got drinks, they've got lots of different things.
Okay.
Right. So, and a bakery might have 300 customers a day. So how many customers you talk to figure out what people want to buy? So I wrote this book and I actually addressed this scenario specifically, right? Because there's this idea that, we can just poll the people and see what they want the next day. But you can't, because maybe somebody, in a bakery, they bake in the morning for what you eat in the late morning and early afternoon, right? So you think, let's let the consumers democratically say what they want. Well, what if I say I want chocolate cookies and I get home and my wife brought home chocolate cookies from work? I don't want chocolate cookies anymore. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's easy to say there are these mechanisms for, and virtually every economic decision is a prediction of the future, right? I drink a Coke because I think it's going to satisfy my thirst. I bake bread now because I think I can sell it in the future. So economic decisions are predictions of the future. Predicting the future is notoriously hard, even for qualified people. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to say we'll have this democratic socialist approach. It doesn't work. It just flat out doesn't work. And if you try and run the traps on it, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly. So here's a good example. A power plant takes about $3 billion to build. Mm-hmm. Okay. How do you, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So you don't agree with worker cooperatives either?
No, so the cooperatives that have worked in the United States have been buying cooperatives and selling cooperatives. The idea that you can run a business end to end, that has not tended to work. There's a company called HEB, I think it's HEB, might be Publix. One of the grocery store chains in the South has a strong dose of worker ownership. But it's still managed by professionals, and there's a subset of stock that decides who gets to manage it. So
so that's not really a worker cooperative. Publix is an employee stock ownership program, so an SEOP. And so therefore, those stores are actually managed or they're not managed democratically. They are actually governed by a small group of people, but the employees have a small stock ownership. But in regards to how the store and the company is actually ran, is not democratic at all. So I am the type of person where I love democracy so much that I actually want it in the workplace as well. And so I would go beyond a employee stock ownership program, and I would have workers actually democratically vote on how things are ran. And additionally to that is we're talking about things like certain goods and services, but what I really want is really collective ownership of the more essential services, whether they be in energy, in education, and things like energy, education, healthcare, things like that. And so,
absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, we started off talking, it's not a binary, it's a scale. And as you say, there are some things that are critical to the public good, and they should have public control. We should have public schools. We should have public roads. There's a school of thought called utility socialism. Once again, we've backed away from it. But at one point, we had regulated monopolies providing electrical service. That was the model you're talking about. It did work for us at one point. The problem isn't that model. The problem is that we backed away from that model, and we started, even with the energy, we started privatizing it and moved away from that central idea that it's a public good and it needs to be managed for the public.
Yeah. So I think there is a little bit of overlap between us. I just think that I disagree on some nuances of what we're talking about. But I also feel like somebody like a Zohran Mamdani, I personally am under no impression that somebody like him would be anything beyond what some people assumed he would be. I think that he'll probably be more like a Blasio-esque type of mayor. And I get completely why people voted for him. They wanted, they didn't want their rent to go up, which, I wouldn't want to either. I see how a city-owned, a municipally owned grocery store would definitely help. And
it's got to change. I agree.
And so for me, somebody, and I'm in Florida, right? My voice really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm just an outsider looking in. But when I look at somebody like a Zohran Mamdani, I say, you guys didn't really have any choices outside of duopoly, so I can't fault the people for that. And when I look at somebody like a Zohran Mamdani, it's like, okay, you're going to govern in this fashion. But this means that, and this is why I directed my attention to the left groups in New York City, it's, are you going to be holding his feet to the fire if he deviates from anything that he said he ran on? And so I think the issue is that some people who consider themselves to be on the left lull themselves to sleep because they think, the job is done once the person is elected, when in reality, the job just started.
Yeah. But then also there's, what is the job, right? And the job for him is to run New York City in an efficient manner that gives people, more access to things, more affordability. I want to circle back to something real quick, because I think this is the key. And you'd said this earlier. There are people that suggest that capitalism is inherently exploitative. Jon Stewart said that. It drives me crazy. That's not actually true. Capitalism is not inherently exploitative. It certainly can be exploitative. But that idea goes back to the labor theory of value, and the labor theory of value is wrong. I mean, grocery stores are a good example. The typical grocery store has a profit margin of 1.5% to 2%. If you say, we should make that, we should socialize that, well, that just means you've reduced prices by 1.5% to 2%. It doesn't really mean you've made that big of a dent. But so if capitalism is not inherently exploitative, then it can be fixed. And that's my point, is that, not just to pick on you, right? But people on the left say these things about capitalism that are provably wrong, and then use that as a way of attacking capitalism and saying we must go to socialism. Whereas if we actually look at capitalism, it can be exploitative, but it's not inherently exploitative. I mean, capitalism is neither moral or immoral. It's amoral. It's how you implement it. And just to take it a step further, right? A typical business makes about a 4% profit. So you can say, they're exploiting the workers, but that's 4%. It's not that much of the pie. And the person that's getting that 4% is managing that business, had to put their own capital at risk, had to put their family life on hold. I mean, so, at least by the numbers, capitalism isn't that exploitative of workers. And assuming you believe that or accept that the labor theory of value is wrong, the people that put in the money deserve a little bit of money for it. I mean, there's no reason that somebody who funded the cost of opening a coffee shop shouldn't get a little bit of return on their capital.
I feel like capitalism is inherently exploitative. Some of the first tools of capital that were utilized in the United States were my ancestors. And so therefore, I do not have any type of love for capitalism whatsoever. And so the owning of the means of production, i.e. my ancestors that we've had in this country, it is inherently exploitative. And look at what they do when it comes to the environment, right? They will shift things in order to be able to earn that's a funny word, but to make more money when it comes to bucking, when it comes to environmental protections. They one of the biggest, no, the largest, greatest theft in the United States is actually wage theft that is committed by corporations day in and day out, every single year. And so it is inherently exploitative when you look at it, because it is about a small group of people who are trying to make the most money and trying to pull the most value from the workers who inherently actually make the value.
Yeah.
And anybody who has the money to be able to invest, it's like, how do they get that money? And nine times out of 10, if they are somebody that's already wealthy, it's because they inherited that wealth. And how did their ancestors get that wealth? Well, their ancestors got that wealth because they also exploited people in order to be able to get that wealth. And so, for instance, like the people who had a Wells Fargo, well, how did they get that wealth? Well, they got that wealth from my ancestors, right? And they were exploited it. So therefore, capitalism is inherently exploitative. And the thing is, it's like, it is better than feudalism, but as in a progressive step. Now we have done with capitalism. Now we are to move on to the next step within our humanity, or, as far as we are on this planet. And it is not going to continue with capitalism, and it's not going to last for at least another. I give it maybe about another 100 years, and I'm being very kind in that, but it is going to phase out because we see the contradictions with it. And a lot of people are completely done with the contradictions because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired within the system that leaves them behind, and keeps a small group of people at the top.
Wait, so let me ask, do you vote? Do you just have you rejected voting? Have you rejected our democratic
Actually,
system?
no, I vote.
Okay, that's good. So that's good, right? So you're not sitting by the sidelines. You're trying to make things better in the here and now. And to your credit.
Well, here's the thing, right? I think it's more of I think it's more like a spectrum, not a spectrum. It's degrees, right?
Yeah.
Voting is only 2% of what we should be doing. This is why I do things like doing mutual aid on the ground, building dual power. I am part of a mutual aid group here in Orlando. I also volunteer and do work with other mutual aid groups in order to be able to build dual power within my local area. And I encourage mutual aid within my channel as well as on RBN in order for people to be able to do that, because we have to get workers together in order to be able to build a new system, because this system is really on its way out. We're in the late stages of capitalism. And so while I do vote, that is something that I spend maybe an hour or two on a Tuesday in November just to bubble in a few names. But ultimately, the real good that I can do is the more direct action I can do for my community. And this is what I encourage people to do, is by doing what they can for their neighbors, for the people around them. Because ultimately, I am actively doing more than what our politicians will do for the rest of us. And because you see it on the ground every single day in front of you. So that's just, it's like, yes, I'm not sitting on the ground on the sidelines, but I'm also not doing what's on the floor, which is doing that 2%, which is voting. I'm doing that and the 90% of what I should be doing.
Yeah, no, good for you, and wonderful, right? And that's the answer, right? The answer isn't I do voting and nothing else. The answer is I do voting and a lot of other things. It's funny. I'm older, and I got married late. I spent a lot of time in coffee shops, and I would hear people my age complain about the youth, and they had no ambition. And the reality was just the opposite, right? The youth had a ton of ambition. It was just ambition in a different direction. And so, from my standpoint, you're youth.
Yeah.
61. And
I want to say this. I do. Are you Gen X?
No, I'm last year of baby boom.
Oh, okay.
64.
I see a lot of ire that people have towards people who are the boomer generation. And I do not necessarily agree that we should paint an entire generation with a broad brush. And so when it comes to the ones who were fighting to push for something better, I do honor that. And I feel like it is up to us to pick up where they left off. And I look at the people like Fannie Lou Hamer. I look at the people like Franz Fanon. I look at the people like Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I look at the people like the James Farmers, and I look at the people like the Assata Shakurs. I look at them and I say, okay, so they did this. How do I pick this up? How do I take the baton and continue?
Yeah.
And so I think I look at those boomers and Fred Hampton. I look at those boomers and I go, okay, they set a course. How do I continue that course? And in that way, I don't paint the entire generation with a broad brush. I honor the boomers that came before me, that taught me, as well as the Gen X, because I know we have some Gen X's in the chat too. And because ultimately, there are some people who either had it right back then and taught us, or they may have been kind of shaky and then they developed and got right as they gotten older. And so I try to also take in the wisdom that I can glean from people like that as well. So I just want to say that I'm not one of those people who tries to paint an entire generation with a broad brush as well, because it's not fair to boomers, and it's not fair for boomers to do it to those of us who are younger. I'm an elder millennial, so so it's really on a case by case basis that I try to treat it.
Yeah. And that's good, right? Because all of this stuff is complex and shades of gray, right?
Oh, definitely.
We yearn for a binary world. The world is not binary. The world is complex and things change. And that's really my point, right? So, I formally joined the Democratic Party earlier this year. I'm now a minor official here in Ferguson. And what I'm trying to do is to get young people to re-engage with the Democratic Party, because not denying much of what you say and not denying that people of my generation had it really good and let it slip away. But the answer is we need to fix what we have. The answer is that we need to acknowledge that we did make these mistakes. We have created a situation where we've kind of returned to the golden age, right? The Gilded Age. But if you look at 1974, we had achieved more income distribution in our country than at any time in our history and probably at any time in the world. That's what we need to get back to. And we can do that. We can get back to one set of rules. We just haven't done it. Let me give you one example, right? In the United States of America, there are really only two kinds of people. There are living, breathing persons and legal persons. And legal persons are corporations. And the corporation was actually one of the great inventions of the modern world, because it allowed human beings to pool resources and do things like build a factory. But what has happened over time is that we have afforded more rights to legal persons, to corporations, than we afford to living, breathing persons. And the easiest example is if I were to send you $1,000, you as a living, breathing person, I've got to tell the IRS I sent you $1,000. Mm-hmm. If you form a corporation and I send you $1,000, I don't have to tell the IRS. So why do we require reporting of money to living, breathing persons, but not of legal persons? Mm-hmm. And it's just one example of thousands where we, without paying attention, people like myself, right? I'm as guilty as anybody else who's 61 years old, because I was aware of this stuff. I knew these things were happening. I wrote the occasional commentary. I didn't get in the trenches and keep it from happening. But that's the problem we have, right? Is we've allowed all of these second sets of rules to be slipped into our system, and it benefits a very narrow part of our population and benefits corporations. And so younger people don't have the same opportunities that we have. Mm-hmm. Just to give you one other example, right, of the impact of rules. In the several decades ago, an academic wrote a paper saying, hey, we should align CEO interests with shareholders' interests. Let's give CEOs options for stock. Mm-hmm. And Wall Street's like, oh my God, free money. And so Wall Street started churning out all of these options. And in the finance world, public companies, they have to file annual reports with the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have to file a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. So when somebody gives you an option to buy stock, that's actually not a cash transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so corporations started issuing all of these options to their senior executives without actually telling the shareholders they were doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's something called the Financial Accounting Standards Board, FASB. FASB said, hey, this is wrong. We've got to put a dollar value on these options.
Mm-hmm.
And Wall Street's response, and I kid you not, was valuing things is really hard. We don't know how to do that. And so the compromise was they only had to do a line item on the annual report saying we gave out 1 million options. So for a period of 15 years, CEOs did not have to tell the shareholders how much money they were getting paid. In that 15-year period, CEO salaries went from give or take 13 times employer wages to 100, 200, 300 times employer wages.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time period, there was no 300% increase in return on equity or return on shareholder value. It was just because a second set of rules allowed a very tiny part of our population to gig the shareholders and get free money. And that's how we have the system we have today. And with a company called Enron, finally FASB put its foot down, and they have to they have to report now. But so again, it's another example. Pretty much anything bad you name, I could probably point to a second set of rules that was inserted in the system while people like myself stood by and let it happen. And I come back to the free market, moderated by democracy, still is the only real option. We just have to get back to the moderating part.
I disagree as far as the moderating part. However, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. But I do appreciate you coming on to have this discussion. And so hopefully there'll be more discussions and dialogue moving forward.
Well, and so next on my list is I'm going after Medicare for all. And I'd love to, when I get a few more of the things published, I'd love to have a conversation with you about that, because Medicare for all is standing in the way of healthcare reform in the United States. And we need to... What's that?
Well, as far as Medicare for all, I think that Medicare for all is not good enough. I think we should have fully nationalized.
Okay. Well, that's it's funny you say that, because when you look at the Medicare for all, they fudge the numbers in a really bad way. And it would likely be a disaster of a system. So in the health insurance world, right, we get our terms confused. What you're talking about is a single employer system, which they have in Great Britain. The doctors actually work for the government. Mm-hmm. And so Bernie proposed Medicare for all, which was a single payer system, but private care providers. Mm-hmm. They fudged the numbers. It would be an economic disaster, and it would get so bad that at some point we would have no choice but to force doctors to come to work for the government. So Bernie did not propose the system that you want, but he laid the groundwork for an economic disaster that could likely result in that system. But so we'll have a healthy conversation about Medicare for all at some point, because I got some thoughts on that.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Ashby. Nice to have you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. You're a really smart guy, and an actual conversation, right? I appreciate that you actually listen to what I say. I listened to what you said. It's nice to actually have conversations again, instead of just people calling me "okay boomer" and all sorts of curse words, via Twitter or TikTok or whatever else it is.
Yeah, Mama taught me better than that. All right.
Good for your mama, good for you.
All right.
Thank
you so very much. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah. All right, folks. That was Mr. Blake Ashby joining in to have that conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation that we had. And yes, sometimes I will have people on who I do not fully agree with on everything. I am trying to make sure that my channel is not one of an echo chamber. And so, of course, we will have on people who, have differing views, of course. And so, yeah, it was very good conversation. It was, and I appreciate, us, listening to one another. And so, just try to have dialogue with people. And also either one or two things will happen. Either you'll be presented with new information that you never knew before, and then it causes you to research something and then find out new information and you readjust, or it solidifies what you've already known and it adds stronger points so that you may be able to contend against whatever other arguments that may come your way. So either way, you win when you have dialogue with people who you may not have some agreements with. So you either learn more or you are stronger in your convictions. So thank you very much to everybody for that one. Go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you so very much to everybody for joining in on this. We will get into the comments in a second, but I do want to do this. We're going to give a shout out to all the patrons on Patreon. And let's get here. All right. So here are the patrons, and here are the tiers. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And welcome to brand new member, Raven T. Now, if that T would have been a B, I would be like, Raven Baxter? Is that you? Thank you so very much, Raven T, for becoming a new member. And guess what? Chicken butt. My channel is demonetized, so if you guys would like to contribute to the channel and support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. So thank you very much to everybody for your support. Let's get into the chat. I know I got some things to say. Let's get in. You guys are very vocal. All right. Let me see. All right. Zero coming in saying, you can't escape me, JB. I am everywhere. I saw you in the mirror this morning. Thank you so very much, Zero. Let me see here. We have Jace coming in saying, hey, JB, good to see you, Jace. Silver Surfer coming in. Peace, JB. Look, I wish I could look like the Silver Surfer. I got to lose a few pounds, though. But look, what if I lost a few pounds and then I wrap myself in some tin foil? That'd be kind of fun. All right, Sean says, good afternoon, JB. Keep up the fight. Thank you very much, Sean. Good to have you. All right. We have Holly coming in. Hi, JB. Good to see you. Nice to have you over here. Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, JB. Hey, everyone. All right. Nice to have you. Reflect the Sun says, hey, JB. Looking forward to this debate. I don't really think it was a debate. First of all, I don't like debates. Number one, I suck at debating. I'm terrible at debating. I hate debates. Secondly, debates online, I don't know, in my opinion, they don't really do any good because you'll have, it's almost like a team sport where both sides will come in to watch and they will cheer for the person who they already agree with. And so then, did it actually move anybody's opinion? Not really. So this is why I don't like debates. Now, maybe somebody may feel a little bit differently. And maybe my opinion is skewed because I'm just not a debater at all. But if I were to debate somebody, I would get a couple of debate coaches. I would get 3 debate coaches. My debate coaches would be Sabby Sabs, Nico House, and Nick Cruz. Those would be my debate coaches. And I'd be like, hey, teach me. But yeah, I'm terrible. So that's why I rather just have a discussion, and we'll do it that way. And yes, Reflect the Sun says, how can you trust the system when you have so much? That's what I was saying. Let me see. Sean Miller coming in. Thank you, giving a salute. Roger says socialism is when the workers have stake over cooperative ownership and control over the economy. workers and communities owning companies, supply chains, manufacturing, production, distribution. Thank you very much for that, Roger. You see, Kilmiko says, I wish we'd done something else. Thank you very much for that. Let me see. See who else I haven't said hello to. Radical Education says Towards a New Socialism by Paul Cockshott. Is that an actual last name? I'm sorry. Why is this thing filled with liquor? It's just water, but I wish it was something else. What a last name. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that one. Jacqueline asks, why would we need to match the productive output of capitalism with socialism if people can't afford or don't need to buy the products that have been manufactured? That's a great question, Jacqueline. That's a really good question. Like, why? Like, for instance, all the production. Let's say hypothetically, all the production that's produced by a company like Amazon, right? A lot of people don't know this, but Amazon actually throws away millions upon billions of dollars worth of goods, especially if they are last year's products, right? They'll throw it away just to keep the prices up. And so it's like, we don't need that much output. We just don't. So why would we want to match the same output? And also for essential services like travel, energy, healthcare, all these different things, if we operate at a loss, we operate at a loss. It is the government. It is the government that is operating it. It's not a business. A government cannot go out of business. So therefore, yeah, if we operate at a loss, okay. But it is still absolutely necessary because, and this is why we need a central planning model, right? And so, yeah, that's a really good question, Jacqueline. I wish I had your brain in my head. Don just says capitalism overproduces, so wouldn't make sense for socialism to put caps on that. Holly says China, Russia is doing well, Vietnam is doing well, and the crazy part is Russia's not even socialist anymore. They're not. They're a social democracy, right? Vietnam isn't even socialist anymore. I mean, they're getting close, but they're not. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Vietnam is socialist, but they're kind of close. At least I think it's the South Vietnamese are mostly socialist, but yeah. Jacqueline says, I mean, we know Venezuela is full of narco terrorists because Trump told us all, right? Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And Violence says overthrowing Allende launched neoliberal economics as the new weapon of choice. Yeah. Jay said the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID. Yeah. These are CIA cutouts that are used in order to destabilize governments that are particularly socialist. So that was the point that I was trying to make. Yeah, so that's, yeah. Jay says IMF debt department. Yeah. That's also really, so Kimiko says I'd take lacking in many things for healthcare, no homelessness, free and excellent education. All right. Yeah. And I was trying to bring up Mohammed Mossadegh, right? How the CIA in the United States and Britain basically overthrew him and put in the Shah, all because he was nationalizing the oil. It's like that was socialism. Yeah. So um, Roger says, I am okay with him believing that capitalism can be fixed, but the rest of us are past fixing it. What we want is stakeholder owned, cooperative based economy. Mm-hmm. All right, let's jump forward, see if we have anybody who I didn't get to. The Wombat says 1974, we had a large stagflation and interest rates were climbing just like Vietnam War was still going on. Yeah. Yeah. And also don't forget when OPEC, they did what they did with the oil prices, and then it caused a huge crash. I see your comment, Jace. I'm not going to put up on screen, but oh boy. Let me see. Let me finish up. Yeah. Okay. This person is a really good British theorist who has some sus takes at times. Got it. Thank you very much. I can't say that name. I'm sorry. Yeah. Radical Education says, JB, I think Vietnam is socialist, but maybe it's building socialism, but I don't know, maybe just dictatorship of the proletariat. They might be on their way. It's just, I don't know if they're as advanced as China right now, which I do think that China is socialist. A lot of people will say, well, China's not socialist anymore. They walked away from socialists. And the thing is that the CPC, not the CCP, it's the CPC, the Communist Party of China, actually really owns a lot of the major industries. And so they're able to dictate exactly, through, they're able to do it through central planning. And so therefore that is at the very essence socialism. And the thing is, like I said, socialism is a transitionary period. So right now they're transitioning away from capitalism, and they're still in that transition. So owning the most essential industries right now is part of that too. So people can say, well, they still have some capitalism. And it's like, yeah, because they're transitioning. That's the part of transitioning. You're going to see some elements of the old system still there while they're going into a new one. But some people are convinced during the transition. It's like it. But that's like putting batter into the oven, and it's not quite completely done. And then you say, "Oh, but that's a cake," or you'll see it almost completely formed and risen, but it's not completely done because you take it out, with you poke it with a toothpick, come out with some batter on it. Oh, but no, that's still batter, and it's like it is on its way to becoming a full cake, and that on its way is the socialism, right? It's not sitting out cold on the counter. Is heating up and is causing the chemical reactions within the batter to become a cake. So therefore, it's the same thing. Is the cake being it being a fully formed cake would be communism. Socialism is when the batter is rising in the oven. And so right now, we're still sitting in this country. We're still sitting out on the counter. We ain't even got the eggs and the oil and the flour and the butter and sugar mixed together. It's kind of like that. So Radical Education says, JB, I wish I could be on the show. My email is in the description. Come through. All right, guys, let's get into the next one. I don't want to be too long, but yes, let's get into the next one. So, of course, myself and Mr. Blake Ashby had a conversation. I thought this was going to be more about Zohran Mamdani, which we did touch on, but it was more about socialism versus capitalism, which was an interesting topic to discuss on. But next, we are going to be going into this story on why this is sus. And we're going to be getting into this. We got to get into Spain and what is going on. This is suspicious. Oh, my goodness. Let's get into this. I think this is a crazy story here. Okay. White supremacists. They are a hallmark of the United States. They have been here ever since its inception, even in its conception. White supremacists have existed on this very land, but it has also been products of Europe, which have been brought over here, but it also still stays at home in a large way. But there's a news story that recently came out about white supremacists being found that have ties to the United States in Spain. So I want to get into that story because it is very deep, and we're going to get into this right now. So I would like to get into the story. This is out of CBS News. It's about to get ridiculous, y'all. It says U.S.-founded neo-Nazi group designated as terrorist organization is busted in Spain. It says Spanish police on Monday said they have broken up a cell of The Base, a transnational neo-Nazi white supremacist group designated a terrorist organization by the European Union, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. You notice here that they didn't say it was designated a terrorist organization by the United States. That's sus. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. All right, let's continue on. The U.S.-founded movement operates through decentralized international network of paramilitary cells that aims at perpetrating attacks and preparing for a race war. It says an investigation launched earlier this year uncovered a Spanish cell whose members were highly radicalized and had training using paramilitary techniques and equipment. In recent months, the suspects had encouraged violent acts, even stating openly that they were prepared to carry out targeted attacks for the cause. The leader of the cell was in direct contact with the group's founder, who 1 month ago called for targeted attacks within the aim of bringing down Western democratic institutions. That was quoted by him. Police arrested 3 suspects last week, including the leader, who was in custody on charges of membership of a terrorist organization, recruitment and indoctrination, and training with terrorist aims, and illegal possession of weapons. They also seized firearms and munition and neo-Nazi paraphernalia during raids in the eastern province of Castilla. Police released a video showing officers raiding the property and handcuffing suspects. The videos also show officers seizing guns and other weapons, as well as books with former Nazi leader Adolf Hitler on the cover. I'm going to tell you this. I watched this. I was questioning whether I should stop at certain moments to pause so that I can skip over it. but it's filled with so much paraphernalia and weapons that I cannot show it on YouTube. But I'm going to tell you this right now. They had a lot of weapons. Like Neo said in The Matrix, guns, lots of guns. They had that. They had guns, they had blades, they had knives, they had paraphernalia, they had books with Adolf Hitler on the cover. They had Nazi flags. This was basically, it's as if Richard Spencer barfed all over the table. Like, is that bad? Okay. And so that video, they show a police raid. The police looked like they were in SWAT gear. This is in Spain. They were in SWAT gear and they came in and, they showed them arresting these guys. By the way, these also neo-Nazis also had pairs of handcuffs on them as well. So just to let you guys know about that. I just got to be careful on YouTube. It says U.S. citizen Rinaldo Nazzaro started the group in 2018 as a network for radical right nationalists readying for armed conflict, and then moved to St. Petersburg and took up Russian citizenship, according to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington-based think tank. So he's a U.S. citizen. In 2020, FBI agents arrested a Canadian Armed Forces reservist, Patrick Jordan Matthews, and 2 other members of the base who were allegedly plotting a terror attack at a pro-gun rally in Virginia. The following year, Matthews was sentenced to 9 years in prison in Maryland. Last year, the European Union added the base to its terrorist list, placing sanctions, including a travel ban and a freeze on assets in Europe. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the group is an anti-Semitic white nationalist network that trains members in survivalism and paramilitary skills to prepare them to mount an armed resistance against the government. Made up of small terroristic cells, the base believes society should be pushed to collapse so a white ethno-state can rise out of the ruins. So that's from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So here's my thing, right? They found this neo-Nazi group had ties to people in the United States. Where have we heard this before? I know you know where I'm going. All right, let's go there. Let's take a look at this. Oh, what are you looking here? From World War II to space race, the story of Project Paperclip. If you don't know about Project Paperclip, Operation Paperclip, as it is affectionately known, then you're about to learn today. You're going to learn today. It says between 1945 and 1960, the United States government brought more than 1,500 German scientists and engineers into the country through Project Paperclip to work on guided missiles, jet and rocket engines, aerodynamic, aerospace, medicine, and submarine technology. The U.S. hoped these specialists can give them an advantage at the end of World War II and into the Cold War. Over time, many of the Germans disappeared into American military, industrial, and academic positions. However, one of them, Werner von Braun, became prominent through his involvement in the space race. The discussion explores Project Paperclip with Dr. Michael Newfield, senior curator at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. And so, it talks about Operation Paperclip here. But Operation Paperclip was ultimately an operation that was done post-World War II to bring Nazi scientists and engineers to the United States. It wasn't anybody who was a victim of the Holocaust. It was perpetrators of the Holocaust brought to the United States in order to help them win the Cold War against the very nation that defeated the Nazis. Remember, it wasn't really the United States that actually dealt the real true blow to the fascists in Europe. It was the Soviets, it was the communists that actually dealt the decisive blow and many other subsequent blows in order to defeat Nazism and fascism. And the United States came in kind of late to the party to do it, because ultimately they didn't really want to fight against them. The other piece that a lot of people don't realize is that the United States wanted the USSR, Soviet Russia in particular, to fall, not because it saw it as a danger to citizens of the United States, but because the ideas and the economic system that they had was proven to be a threat to what the United States had in place, which was basically an exploitative system of capitalism. And so if people in the West, particularly the United States, looked at Russia or the Soviet Union at the time and saw that they were doing materially better than the rest of us, then that could influence the United States, the people of the United States, to push towards a more socialist system, which would threaten the power of the capitalists at that time. And so it was basically the equivalent of you live in broke and poor because your parents really don't want to do much for you, even though they could. And then you're looking through that window and your house and your next door neighbor, actually, they're doing really good for their kids. And you notice that your parents also have the ability to do the same, but your parents just don't want to. And then you're like, you start looking at your parents kind of sideways. Like, wait, they could do that for them, so that means you could do that for us. And it's not like they live in a completely different neighborhood. We both live in the same neighborhood, but why are we being treated like trash when the kids across the way are being treated really good, right? So this is why they really wanted to get rid of the Soviet Union, because essentially their material needs were being taken care of more. Also, in addition to that, in the Soviet Union, they also were basically telling Black people, hey, the people over there, they're white supremacists. They don't like y'all. And so y'all don't need a system like that, because they're harming you guys left and right just to keep you guys divided. I reflect on Paul Robeson when he actually said that he felt like a full human being, a full man, a full human being when he actually visited the Soviet Union. Paul Robeson was an actor and a Black man, a singer as well. And so this is one of the reasons why they wanted to have the Cold War. The Cold War was not really necessary, except from a capitalist perspective, in order to keep capitalism in place so that people won't look to greener pastures. And so they employed the enemies of those greener pastures, the fascists and the Nazis, in order to be able to help them win the war against a system that would actually be better for the American people. I wouldn't say it's perfect, not by any means, but it would definitely be better for the American people. With that being said, Operation Paperclip was employed, and by we mean the United States government, brought Nazis over, gave them homes, gave them jobs, and let them roam free in our cities and streets, indoctrinating our children and families and neighbors with their disgusting ideology of supremacy, white supremacy. And so this kind of makes sense because, well, the Nazis actually learned what they did from the United States and how they treated the Native Americans as well as Black American freedmen. And so this is what Operation Paperclip was. And so it goes without saying, this is why I look at this as suspicious. Because ultimately, this US-backed neo-Nazi group in Spain, is it just a couple of lone wolf actors that are actually pushing for something like this? Or is this something more? And this is one of the reasons why I look into what the CIA is actually doing. Because ultimately, I feel like they would need right-wing extremism in order to be able to take hold and keep hold of what's going on now. Because a lot of polls are showing that young people, it's like the majority of young people now are favorable towards socialism. And so that means the capitalists are seeing the system slip through their fingers now. And so instead of keeping just regular plain old neoliberalism around, which kept people like, myself, Gen X, and baby boomers around and kept us on a hook, now they're going to have to go to more extreme methods, because the younger people, they see through the BS. They see through exactly the lies that have been told to us. And so I don't put anything past the CIA. Remember, we had a CIA president. His name was George Herbert Walker Bush. He was head of the CIA for some years. So it's without saying that the CIA is deeply entrenched in what the United States does here and abroad. This is actually just a couple weeks ago. This is out of Axios. It says suspected National Guard shooting near White House helped the CIA. Says the suspect in Wednesday's shooting of 2 West Virginia National Guard troops as an Afghan national who entered the U.S. in 2021 after working with the CIA and other U.S. government agencies during the war. CIA Director John Ratcliffe tells Axios in a statement. So it says after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Biden administration justified bringing the alleged shooter to the United States in September 2021 due to his prior work with the U.S. government, including CIA as a member and partner of the force in Kandahar. It says the guard members from. So it talks about how the guards were shot by this gentleman who says was an act of terror. But here's the crazy part: it is not out of the norm for the United States or the CIA to bring horrible, depraved people to their country, to our country, in order to grow these supremacist ideologies, to let them fester here. And the crazy part is, it's like we've had, for instance, we've had white supremacist groups run roughshod in this country for, the entire country's history, and yet they're still around. We can't even weed them out. And it's like, why can't we weed out these white supremacist groups? Why can't we get rid of these white supremacist groups in the United States? Why is there more attention placed on groups that are more about actual liberation of marginalized groups than there is more attention given to these white supremacist groups? Well, ultimately, it's because the United States government is actually in league with these groups, or they will turn a blind eye to these groups because they actually kind of agree with what they do. A lot of people don't want to say it, but hey, it's true. We live in a very white supremacist system. And so this is not really surprising to me. This is why, as soon as I read that headline from CBS News, I was like, well, what has the CIA been doing this time? And so in order to be able to keep a stronghold, a foothold on the system, on the people, well, you got to do some scapegoating. You got to make sure that these extremists, they keep their numbers up. In order for them to be able to keep their numbers up, well, you got to let them grow. You got to let them develop a little bit. And so the United States government will allow that, because then that keeps the working class divided. And so you have these white supremacists, or these guys who lead lonely ass incel lives without ever being able to touch a human being, Nick Fuentes. And so therefore they get to a point where they end up needing community, and they get community in a form of a bunch of uh pasty face, pizza face looking incels that sit in their room all day and ain't got not one goddamn ounce of vitamin D because they keep the shutters closed. And so therefore they're like, hey, well, we hate all these people, so let's hate them together. Yay, community. And so this is exactly what you get. This is why I stay so brown, because I get my vitamin D when I'm outside. Anyways, so this is the problem that we have, is that the United States will continuously go new phone who this when it comes to these groups. So this is why I look at somebody like a John Ratcliffe and I'm like, bro, what have you been doing? How many people knew who the CIA director is? And so whether it's Ratcliffe, I think it was John Brennan was the former CIA head of the CIA. But all these guys that were part of the CIA, they essentially, their job is to keep Western and U.S. supremacy, and really U.S. supremacy is tied to white supremacy. They want to keep that as high as possible. So they make sure that this spreads abroad. And so this is why I look at events like this and I'm like, wait a minute. This smells like U.S. intelligence. Let me share this here as well. And people are asking, what is the base? That's what they call themselves. They can't even get clever anymore and come up with an actual name. They just came up with the base. It's weird. It says, what is the base? FBI arrest of alleged white supremacists put focus on extremist group. The decentralized neo-Nazi movement has chapters across the United States and the world, and experts say members' threats of violence should be taken seriously. And so these are members of the base, right? So this came out in 2020. David Holden, the president of a small synagogue in rural Michigan, had never heard of the base until his house of worship was defaced last fall. So it says the FBI's pursuit of alleged members of the group widened, with authorities in Georgia announcing charges Friday against 3 additional men accused of belonging to the base and plotting to overthrow the government and murder a couple. Now, says members of the base allegedly spray painted at least one synagogue in Race, Washington, with swastikas, the anti-Semitic language. Authorities also suspect this case is linked to one at Temple Jacob. So these are actual anti-Semites, not what members of the ADL want to call anybody who criticizes the state of Israel. But these are real anti-Semites that are actually a danger to society. But the United States, they'll tacitly go after maybe a few, but they won't really do a real takedown of them. And so it just goes to show how the United States, constantly, they'll placate like, oh yeah, we're actually going after them, when in reality they don't. And so that's one of my biggest questions, right? It's always suspicious when you see when you see groups like this come about. Let me go here as well. and this is out of the Jacobin magazine. It says Spain's far-right Vox Party is inciting race violence. The Vox Party is typically masks racism, more palatable rhetoric, but this summer, leading Vox MPs helped incite violence against residents of Maghrebi origin in the Murcia region in Spain. So it says the violence of Torre Pacheco, which began on July 11th, followed several less severe but similar incidents. Days early, Sabadell, a working-class neighborhood in Barcelona, has seen multiple nights of racist attacks against migrant residents, triggered by protests over insecurity allegedly caused by squatters of foreign origin. That same week, a mosque in the town of Piera, near Barcelona, was set on fire just before its inauguration. Islamophobia and racism against workers from Morocco and other North African countries are the most common forms of racism in Spain. In previous years, there have been attacks on centers of housing unaccompanied migrant minors, particularly in Catalonia and the Madrid region. However, the summer's string of racist incidents marks a qualitative shift. It reveals that the far right has chosen a strategy of racist propaganda through violence. And so, not only is this being utilized, in places like Spain, but it's also being pushed by residents in the United States in order to be able to grow this fascistic white supremacist type of ideology more abroad so that it can continuously come here. So if the CIA was actually serious about spreading democracy and protecting the United States, they would be trying to take down these agencies, but you never hear about the CIA trying to take these agencies down. Never. Hell, I doubt the FBI really does much against these white supremacist groups anymore either. I think they just watch a little bit and then just stay back. Versus they're actually trying to go after the ones who are actually threatening power on behalf of working class people, which is the left. So keep your eyes out for what's going on in this country. If we start seeing more white supremacist groups pop up, something tells me the alphabet agencies are behind the whole thing. Go ahead and like the stream. Thank you very much. Let's move on and get into the final segment, y'all. All right. So, you know what? I didn't check to see if I had any. I didn't check to see if I have any Rumble rants. My apologies. Looks like we're good on the Rumble side. Let me check to see if I have any gift subs on Kick. Looks like we're good on the Kick side too. All right. Okie dokie smoking. Let's get into the chat. Jacqueline says, I don't know where we're going, JB, but yes, I have heard of Operation Paperclip. Violence says, converting corporations into worker co-ops means converting munition factories into renewable energy sector to fuel a peace economy. I am of the, okay, so I don't think that weapons manufacturers, corporations, like the Raytheons and the Northrop Grummans and the General Dynamics and Lockheed Martins, I don't think they should be worker cooperatives. I think that they should be fully government corporations, just like how you have the United States Postal Service, or you have the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. They should be completely government owned. 100%. Because there should be Not one iota of profit made in those industries at all. Because once you start to make any type of profit, then it makes it easier for you to reason, well, if we need more profit, then we just have a little bit more war. It doesn't matter if they win the war or they lose the war, just as long as a war is fought, because that means that the corporations make money. Ultimately, that's what it means. And so that's the only thing I'll say. I just don't think that the weapons manufacturer sector should be private or privately owned. Not even a non-profit. No, it should be completely government owned. Sila says Paul Robeson was a true Renaissance man. Mm-hmm. Great dresser too. Oh wait, let's go here. It says Sean Miller says the West sponsored the rise of the Nazis. Edward says this is why the U.S. government helped Nazi foes come to the United States and South America. The U.S. feared Russia more than the Nazis because the Soviet communist system. Funny how the U.S. embraces communism. I also agree, Violin, that we need a full accounting of paperclip names and all. Yeah. The Wombat says the white supremacist groups are a part of law enforcement overwhelmingly. Absolutely. They're all law enforcement also is a group that is very high in domestic violence. And so if somebody's in a relationship with somebody who's in law enforcement, I wonder about that person's safety. I am concerned for the safety of the partner. I don't care if it is a man that's in a relationship with a female cop, or a man that's or a woman that's in a relationship with a male cop. I don't care if it's a queer relationship. I don't care. I worry about the safety of the partner. Dystopia says, James, you really gave that guy grace, and I respect you so much for not losing your like I would. Thank you very much. I hope I defended my positions pretty good. I don't know. I'm still kind of like, I don't know if I defended myself. My position's good enough. I got so much to learn. I have a lot to learn. But thank you very much. Appreciate that. Jacqueline says the base that they have spent hours scratching their heads and racking their brains to come up with that name. White supremacists are idiots. Oh, silly fascist tricks for kids. Oh my gosh. Oh, I just came up with that. Did you like it? All right. Violence says if workers have the power to dismantle a corporation, they can also choose to change what is produced and how. Great point. And then Sila says we need to be careful with not those who call themselves white, but even our own who take on the role of supremacists as well. Absolutely, Sila. Yes. And so this means going with the ones that are the turncoats too. We call them by a certain name, that likes to dig in the trash and likes to eat whatever's in there, and they make a voice. So we gotta be careful with those too. Oh gosh, I need help. Anyway, so let's get into the water your plants, water yourself, baby. All right, let's get into the final segment that we will be getting into today. Okay, so course, let me take this banner down real quick. Get off me. All right. So we already spoke to Mr. Ashby, Blake Ashby, about the best path forward for the left. And we had that discussion. Then we talked about the suspicious issues that's going on, with U.S.-backed neo-Nazi groups in Spain. No bueno, no bueno. Now we need to talk about some more supremacists. So these supremacists are more of the Zionist kind we're going to be getting into. We're going to be getting into the Three Stooges here. We're going to be getting into them. Let's get into the story. Monsters, Inc. Yes, these three monsters. We're discussing what's going on with them. And I'm not sure if you guys found out about this story, but I'm going to be real with you. It's bad. It's very bad. And I'm going to explain to you guys exactly why. So, make sure I have my stuff prepared. Because, JB got to come prepared. All right. And let's go. I take issue with the recent actions of Ron DeSantis. And the reason why is because this next action that he has done is going to harm people based on their religion. And it is painting groups of people with a broad brush based on falsehoods and lies. And as we are seeing now here in Florida, the Islamophobia is growing exponentially. And so I want to get into this news story that just happened within the last 24 hours. And so I also want those of you who either are Muslim, or if you have friends or family or loved ones that are Muslim, I want you to pay keen or close attention to this. And we are going to discuss this, and we're going to discuss the background of this and why it's so needed that we fight against this type of supremacy and fascism throughout the state. Let's get into this. This was actually shared by Governor Ron DeSantis just a day ago. He says, effective immediately, Florida is designating the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, as foreign terrorist organizations. Florida agencies are hereby directed to undertake all lawful measures to prevent unlawful activities by these organizations, including denying privileges or resources to anyone providing material support. So let's read the letter that Ron DeSantis put out. And so this is an executive order by Ron DeSantis. So it says, protecting Floridians from radical Islamic terrorist organizations. He says, whereas pursuant to Section 874 Florida statutes, a terrorist organization, any organized group engaged in or organized for the purpose of engaging in activity involving a violent act or a danger to human life, is intended to intimidate, injure, or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a government through destruction of property, assassination, murder, kidnapping, or aircraft piracy. And whereas the Society of Muslim Brotherhood was founded in Egypt in 1928 and have developed into a transnational network with a long history of engaging in supporting violence, including political assassinations, terror attacks on civilians for the purpose of establishing worldwide Islamic caliphate and imposing its Islamic systems of belief across the globe, including the United States. And Jesus Christ. Whereas the Muslim Brotherhood's Islamist ideology is irreconcilable with foundational American principles of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness reflected in the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, especially including the right to religious freedom and the equal protection of laws. And whereas on November 24, 2025, President Trump issued Executive Order 14362 to initiate a process by which certain chapters of the other subdivisions of the Muslim Brotherhood shall be considered for designation for terrorist organizations. And whereas Muslim Brotherhood supports a network of chapters, political entities, and front organizations that engage in terrorism or funnel money into finance terrorist activities. Whereas the members of the Muslim Brotherhood created Hamas in 1987, the primary goal of which the destruction of the state of Israel and the eradication of Jews in the historic homeland of Judea and Samaria. Whereas the United States government designated Hamas as a foreign terrorist organization on October 8, 1997, whereas the October 7, 2023, Hamas murdered 1,200 men, women, and children in Israel, including 46 Americans, took 254 hostages, including 12 Americans. And whereas in the aftermath of October 7th attack, Muslim Brotherhood chapters in the Middle East joined attacks against Israel with or otherwise provided material support to Hamas, Hezbollah, and other Palestinian groups, whereas organizations affiliated with Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas have active fundraising arms in the United States, which have raised funds for Hamas terrorist attacks in the Middle East. And whereas Palestinian Committee, an organization affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and created to support Hamas in the United States, expressly sought to increase the financial and moral support for Hamas and oversaw the organizations designated to raise money for Hamas, whereas the Palestine Committee, founded on a Council of American Islamic Relations, CAIR, to the United States, and whereas CAIR was founded by persons connected to Muslim Brotherhood and was created, in the words of persons affiliated with CAIR, as an unofficial U.S. cover representing the Islamic country to conceal ties to Islamic extremist groups, whereas CAIR was designated as an unindicted co-conspirator in the United States government in the largest terrorism financing case in American history, and the court found ample evidence to establish the association of CAIR with terrorist organizations. So I'm not going to read the entire thing, but essentially any type of group that is associated with liberation, whether it be Palestinians, people in Lebanon, people in it could be Yemen, it could be Iran, no matter what, they're labeling them terrorist organizations. Now, here's the problem. When it comes to groups like CAIR, they are, by definition, a civil rights group. And so to go after CAIR is the equivalent of going after the NAACP. It's like going after the Urban League. Also, while we're at it, I also find it funny how they're talking about influencing or coercing public policy in this letter, as if AIPAC, J Street, Kufi, and all the other Zionist groups do not exist in this country. So it's okay for a nation that is literally committing a 21st century Holocaust on a people to have all this power within our government. Not just the United States government as a whole, but also our state government in Florida. But for a group to either fight for the liberation of Palestinians and also anti-imperialism, or for another group to fight for the civil rights of not just people who are Muslim, but all people of all religions, as well as for people who are Arab. That's a bridge too far. But what Zionists can do, that's fine. Even though they're committing a 21st century Holocaust on the people of Palestine. It is crazy to me how some people will just sit back and say, okay, when in reality, you guys talk about stopping fascism, and yet it's right in your face. This is Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis does not care about Floridians, even if they are Muslim, or especially if they're Muslim, especially if they're Black. So let me share this because Ron DeSantis, I guess, decided to crawl out of his little hole and tell people, hey, you know what? They're going to work. Basically, the Florida government is going to designate this group. They're basically going to be doing this against the any person, including Floridians, who are fighting for civil rights in the state. So let's get into this here.
The Council on American Islamic Relations is announcing a legal challenge to Governor Ron DeSantis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Sarah Rosario.
And I'm Frank Wiley. All of this coming after the governor designated CAIR and the Muslim Brotherhood as foreign terrorist organizations. That right there, a live look from CAIR's office in Tampa, where that announcement is happening right now. And we are streaming it for you live on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. 10 Tampa Bay News reporter Asha Patel shows you what the terrorist label means for civil rights groups.
Florida's new order tells state agencies to block the two groups and anyone supporting them from state contracts, jobs, and funding. Now, if you guys take a look at your screen, these 3 key points really highlights what this all means. Florida's new designation doesn't just target CAIR, it puts pressure on any group that has worked with or supported the organization. Under the order, those allies could lose access to state contracts, funding, or even public sector jobs. And for many community and advocacy groups, it means reevaluating partnerships or risk being cut off from key state resources. Now you're seeing CAIR's direct response, saying, quote, Governor DeSantis is targeting our civil rights group with this unconstitutional and defamatory proclamation. Now, CAIR also fired back with a clear message to the state saying, quote, see you in court. Now, CAIR is expected to hold a news conference this afternoon, and we will have a 10 Tampa Bay crew there. And we'll bring you the latest of what comes out of that news conference. But for now in Tampa, Asha Patel, 10 Tampa Bay News.
Thank you, Asha. And Governor DeSantis is not the first governor to label their groups as terrorist organizations. Last month, Texas Governor Greg Abbott tried to do the same thing. CAIR asked a federal judge to strike it down, saying that label is unconstitutional. The court sided with the Muslim group.
So as we see this is now going on, I also want to share this because it's important that we hear exactly what's going on. In fact, that's not what I wanted. Let me see. The Ron DeSantis decided that he wanted to go against CAIR, and I'm gonna be honest with you, anybody that tries to do any work with CAIR, this is going to stop whatever type of work they're doing. Like, for instance, the young, well, he was 15 when he was kidnapped by Israel while on visiting his family earlier this year. But Muhammad Ibrahim, CAIR also was helping with getting him released. And so this will make it more difficult for people like him who are detained and kidnapped by the IOF. This will make it more difficult for Palestinian organizations who are helping to bring children who have been maimed, harmed, and injured by Israel to come here to get medical attention so that they can get the surgery needed in order to be able to live a slightly better life. And so it's going to make it much more harder for them. And really the cruelty is the point, right? Because ultimately, if they really were against violence that was being perpetuated, they would have done the same thing to the Zionist organizations in the United States, but they're not. It's all one-sided. And on top of that, the Zionist organizations are literally defending an illegal occupation versus the Palestinian, particularly the Palestinian groups that are fighting against occupation, which is their legal right to do. So I want to share this because Ron DeSantis has fired back against the organization of CAIR. And let's get into this here.
Now at noon, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis making a South Florida stop. He spoke at FIU's Biscayne campus in North Miami Beach. CBS News Miami's Morgan Reiner is your reporter live where the governor just wrapped up. Morgan.
Yeah, Naja, he spoke about how Biscayne Bay is more than just beautiful. Projects include septic to sewer conversions, stormwater management, and enhancing water quality. $9 million is also going towards restoring the coral reefs. And Naja, during today's press conference, we got to ask about other big news of the day. I asked about the state of Florida designating the Council on American Islamic Relations, also known as CAIR, as a foreign terrorist organization. The order DeSantis put online says CAIR was founded by people connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, which the order says is connected to Hamas and the October 7th attack on Israel.
Why are they still showing B-roll of the Everglades? Hold up. This is one of my gripes. Like, okay, it's like, okay, in addition to talking to him about the Everglades, but they led with like, oh, we're talking about, freshening the water. Fine, okay. But why did you guys switch to B-roll to what's going on with CAIR and talking about that? Isn't it weird how they'll just stick and if somebody's not listening, they'll think, oh, they're still just talking about the Everglades. When in reality, no, only a minute and 10 seconds in, they stopped talking about it. And now they're talking about a completely different subject. But they're still showing B-roll of the Everglades. Y'all are not okay. And this is why even local news, you got to be very careful. You got to be very careful with local news. I'm just saying, they be on some sus stuff. They be suspicious from time to time, or almost all the time.
On Israel. CAIR is the largest Muslim civil rights advocacy group in the U.S. The Florida chapter says it's going to sue the governor and the state of Florida. DeSantis says a lawsuit would be great, gives the state even more access to their documents. Take a look.
We welcome that. I mean, we did do the designation for both the Muslim Brotherhood and CAIR. This is something that has been a long time coming. I know the federal government's now working in a similar direction. The legislature is working on statutory laws that are going to impact this area. So I think our executive order is kind of the beginning.
And right now, CAIR is holding a press conference outlining and going over their lawsuit towards the governor and the state of Florida. We do have a coworker there, a reporter. We will have the full story for you coming up on CBS News Miami starting at 5.
All right. So in that, CAIR actually did have a press conference, and then they actually fired back at Ron DeSantis, which I think they had a lot to say. I think it's important that we cover what CAIR said, because a lot of people probably won't even listen to what they have to say. But I think it's important that we listen to what they have to say, because they are literally a civil rights group that's being targeted by the governor. So let's go in here.
For decades. We have met with elected officials at local, state, and federal levels. We represent the voice of the American Muslim community, and we defend not only the Muslim community, but the community at large when there are instances of discrimination. We have protected the rights of Floridians from the Muslim community and even outside of the Muslim community. We've helped secure their religious rights. We've defended against First Amendment free speech violations. We've supported prisoners' rights. We've protected free speech for students. And we've stood up against discrimination. We've contributed to local food pantries and back-to-school drives to advance equity amongst all of us. We've stood with community organizations to support their causes, just as they've stood with us to support ours. And we've engaged in interfaith work to get to know our Christian brothers and sisters and our Jewish brothers and sisters from different faiths, because we know full well that when we meet together, when we open our hearts and minds, when we have these conversations, when we find common grounds, we have a better and more beautiful America. We have a safer America. Our community allies include groups from faith-based organizations, Christian and Jewish communities, civil rights groups, and others who we work with to promote our shared values and causes. If you are not sure about the work that we do, we invite you to follow us on our social media. Our work is public, and we are very proud to defend our Constitution. We are very proud to defend the founding principles of our Constitution, to defend free speech. We are proud to defend democracy, and we are proud to be America first. But that's where the problem is. That's when these issues that we advocate for become problematic for some of our politicians, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. When these issues become problematic for some of our politicians, we get attacked. I'll explain this very clearly to the American people and to the people of Florida. I will tell you exactly what the smear campaign is about. From the moment that Ron DeSantis took office as the governor of Florida, he has prioritized serving the Israeli government over serving the people of Florida. He hosted his first official cabinet meeting in Israel, not in Florida, not in our capital, not in Tallahassee, but in Israel. Ron DeSantis.
So, I mean, this is who Ron DeSantis is. I said it in the video before, and I'll say it here for people who have not gotten it clear. Ron DeSantis is not Florida first. He's not America first. He's Israel first. He don't care about you. He don't care about me. He don't care about nobody but the interests of occupiers who are trying to commit a Holocaust. That's who Ron DeSantis is. He will kiss the feet of Benjamin Netanyahu before he will ever care about you or me or our kids at all. He does not care. And in fact, he will attack anybody and everybody on behalf of a nation, on behalf of a foreign power instead of fighting for his fellow Americans, instead of fighting for his fellow Floridians. He will not fight for you. And he has proven so. So when are you going to wake up? Ron DeSantis is essentially one of the three monsters that I'm pointing out here. His ideology is monstrous. And he will continue to let this happen. Like, how often did he speak out when there was a Floridian from Tampa, an American citizen, that was beat to death just a few months ago in Palestine? Where was Ron DeSantis? When Mohammed Ibrahim was kidnapped by the IDF and starved and tortured, a child, for 9 months. And yes, I talked about it. I actually talked about this story last week. Thankfully, he was released. But no thanks to Ron DeSantis. Because Ron DeSantis would rather lick the boot of supremacists than he would ever wanting to honor any one of us who are fellow citizens. So let this be a lesson to you in knowing who Ron DeSantis is. Ron DeSantis is Israel first and Israel only. He's not America first. He's not America at all. He's not Florida first. He's not Florida at all.
This has sent millions of Floridians' taxpayer money to Israeli government bonds, while Floridians are suffering from a lack of health care, while Floridians are suffering from food scarcity, from economic crises, from high rent. Our economy is suffering, but our tax money is going to fuel a better quality of life for Israelis. And billions of U.S. taxpayer money is funding the genocide in Gaza. Let me be clear. CAIR Florida highlights these issues not only as opposition to the genocide, but because sending so much money to a foreign nation while our people are struggling to make ends meet directly hurts Americans. It directly hurts Floridians.
So let's make it clear. He is busy sending money. The hell with it. I'm going to say it. He's busy sending money to the side chick rather than take care of their own kids at home. Let's be real. Let's call it how it is. He's taking care of the side chick. And the kids ain't even his. Isn't that wild? That's like a man taking care of a side chick. And then the kids ain't even his. Why? He got his own kids starving at home. What do you call that? When you call that a deadbeat? Oh, so yeah, we got a deadbeat governor. We got a deadbeat for a governor. His nose is so wide open for Israel, you can basically see his brainstem. Like, my God. And people support this guy? That guy? Florida is literally the 9th most expensive state to live in, according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach report. And they're not even batting an eye. It is way too expensive to live here. And he's welcoming all the gentrifiers from everywhere else over here. Come to Florida, come to Florida. No! Don't come to Florida. Don't come to this swamp. And this is the crazy part. He won't even help fund us. And then he talks about, oh, well, we don't need socialism. We don't need that socialized medicine. Yeah, he's willing to give socialized medicine to people in Israel. Yeah, he's willing to give free college to people in Israel. Yeah, he's willing to give free childcare to people in Israel. Oh, he's cool when it comes to socialism for people who are in Israel, but when it comes to actually providing for Floridians, he doesn't give a damn about you. He doesn't give a damn about me. I wonder if he gives a damn about his own damn kids. Does he even know their names? Does he even know remember their birthdays? And this is the crazy part that is wild to me. How we sit here with a monster in our midst, Monsters Inc., and we just do not. We'll just allow him to say and do whatever he wants. And then when it comes to groups that are literally trying to fight for the civil rights of other groups, we'll just sit back and let it happen. Let this happen to the NAACP or the Urban League or some other group that is a Black liberation group. And by the way, CAIR's not even that radical. They're not. But at the same time, they're also doing some good. But if that happened to the NAACP, how many Black people will be like, oh, hell no. Nah. And for some of y'all that don't know, that may not live in a place where it may not be that regular, but there are a lot of Black Muslims too. And as the grandson of a Black Muslim man, this is offensive to me. This is why solidarity is so important, because they're coming after different groups who are actually trying to provide for the people. I want to play that entire press conference because they were cooking. They were cooking that entire press conference. But unfortunately, due to the sake of time, I really can't show too much more. But I do want to share this. Because here's the thing. You show me a Zionist, and I will show you a white supremacist. Etamam Ben-Gvir and whatever his damn name is, Smotrich. These guys are white supremacists too. Let's share. Thank you to Jasper Nathaniel. He says, Ben-Gvir and friends were wearing a noose to signal their support for executing detainees, clearly designed to look like a yellow hostage ribbon at first glance. That's Heritage Minister Amichai Elihu on the right, who oversees ethnic cleansing in Sebastia. Look at what they're wearing. These are the horrible people. These people, these are who they are. Look at that. And look, I will be the first to say, let them come to the hood with that on. Black people, come to the front. Come to the front. Y'all know. Y'all talk in the comments. If they went into the hood with that pin on, I'm telling you, you see a whole bunch of dudes with shiesties on ready to deal with them. I'm telling you, that's how it would go. And yet they can walk around with noose pins. And advertising how genocidal and homicidal they are. And this is who Ron DeSantis wants to give money to? This is who Ron DeSantis is trying to protect? He's talking about, oh my God, extremism. Wait, are you kidding me right now? Yo, this is the extremism. Bro, extremism right here. And you mean to tell me that he wants to go after CAIR? CAIR? Nah, Ron DeSantis is Israel first. Nah, man. This is exactly who he is. He don't give a damn about you or I. And so all this BS about, oh, well, he's America first. Stop lying. Stop lying. No. He never was. He never is. He'll never will be. He probably puts Israel before even his own wife. Oh no, baby, not tonight. I'm too tired. I gotta talk to Benjamin Netanyahu. He probably cares more about Israel than he does in the lifts that he puts in his shoes. Damn fascist. So this is why it's so important for us to look at groups that are fighting for civil rights and liberation. Don't get me wrong, right? You have some groups that, you know, still entertain reforming the system, right? But even still, right, they don't deserve to be going after like that. They're not doing anything to harm people. They might not be doing enough, in my opinion, to help liberate, right, Palestine and you know, a lot of Arab countries. Or you may have Arabs and Muslims, right, that may feel that way. But they're not harming anybody, right? Not at least to the extent that nowhere near what these fascists think. They're just trying to provide civil rights and help free people from oppression and, you know, have unity with people of different groups. That's not damage. That's not. What can we do? The groups that are fighting for liberation, especially the groups that lead with a group of marginalized people. Like, for instance, you have the African People's Socialist Party in Florida, the Uhuru group that's chaired by Omali Yeshitela. You have the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP, right? You have Florida Palestine Network. They are a wonderful organization that are fighting on the ground. You have the American Indian Movement, AIM, who here in Florida that are, you know, pushing for liberation for Native Americans here in Florida. I don't know if New Era Young Lords is here. I'll have to check. But there's so many different liberation groups that are anti-imperialist. Some are also anti-capitalist, but they're fighting for the liberation of their respective groups, right? And there are probably also other, you know, Black freedmen groups here that is fighting for it as well. But the problem is that we cannot stand by and allow another civil rights group to get trampled on. Because guess what that means? If we allow them to get trampled on, then guess what's going to happen to us? First, they came for the communists, for I did not speak out for I'm not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out for I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and then I did not speak out for I was not a trade unionist. And then it goes on and on and on and on, and you can't let it continue. You cannot give a fascist an inch. You cannot give them an inch at all. And so this is why it's so important that we push for helping people, especially who are fighting for liberation of their groups, as well as they help us in liberation of our own. This is how bad they are. This is from Mint Press News. This says popular children's content creator Miss Rachel revealed that she was forced to hire security due to an escalation in severe threats against her and her family. These threats increased significantly after pro-Israel organization Stop Anti-Semitism included her on its anti-Semite of the Year shortlist and launched a campaign against her. Miss Rachel stated that the constant attacks by the group Stop Anti-Semitism led to a spike in threats. The group accused her of spreading Hamas-aligned propaganda for posting about the suffering of Palestinian children and raising funds for aid. The harassment has taken a significant psychological toll on her and her family. She mentors her young son accidentally overheard conversations about her safety and was scared something would happen to her. And so they're doing that to this sweet woman who just wants to help kids. This reminds me of the young black man, Michael, who was talking about libraries and pushing for people to come to the library and learn more about libraries. And then you discover he had all these library tattoos. Michael was cool. He is a cool dude, and I would actually want to interview him, meet him. But the thing is, like, people were saying, "Oh my God, this guy is weird." This is just words people were saying. "Oh my God, this guy is so weird," and they made him want to, stop. But this is so much worse. They're like threatening the life of a woman that is helping to teach little children, and just because she has compassion for Palestinian children, now they're coming after her. This is who Ron DeSantis is cool with. These are the monsters that are attacking somebody like a Miss Rachel. If Fred Rogers was still alive, and if he spoke out against what's going on in Palestine, they'd be after him. They'd be after Mr. Rogers. And they better not come after LeVar Burton. Oh, hell no. They better not. If LeVar Burton says anything regarding the humanity of Palestinians, if they come after him, we better link up. We better protect him. Mr. Reading Rainbow himself. Can you imagine if they came after Bob Ross? Like, these are the people who they're very pure-hearted people, and they see the suffering of what people are going through. Now, I don't want people who consider themselves to be Democrats to get too comfortable with me either. Because a lot of y'all are full of it. Because y'all also were very, very nasty to Palestinians, especially last year. The lines between y'all and Ron DeSantis are very blurred. Let me remind you of who y'all are. This was at the DNC convention last year.
The blood of these children from your house. 13 years old. Sana Abulle.
Say it again. Say it again. Mock them again. Mock the children again. Do it again. Do it again.
18 years old.
Hold up. Nigga, really? If somebody said that about one of us, you got a problem with it. But you're willing to do it to somebody else. You're willing to dehumanize and make fun of somebody else, knowing our history and what we've been through. The dehumanizing is not limited to white supremacists who are white on the outside. This is why decolonizing our minds is so important. This is why decolonizing our minds and our hearts is so important. Because this person allowed themselves to be separated from their empathy. I ain't got no insults for you, dude. Shame on you. And yeah, this happened a year ago. Yeah. And unfortunately, this image right here lives rent-free in my head. Why? Because it's sad to see somebody that looks like me to lack such compassion while walking into a Democratic National Convention and claims to be the party of civil rights. Civil rights, my ass.
Years old. 15 years old. Yusuf Hassan. 8 years old. Turn around and join the uncommitted delegates in the protest.
So, and by the way, I don't want to hear anything from any of you who say, "Oh, we're progressive," and yet you guys are talking about LGBTQ rights, and yet you see this lady with a rainbow band around her wrist, basically signaling that she's LGBTQ, but then she wants to close her ears to the suffering of Palestinians. Nah. Gloria Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson will roll in their graves knowing what you just did. So this is why I say the monsters. And we have to look at what people like Ron DeSantis is doing and counter it by having solidarity with these groups. Now, we can continue to fight for our own issues that we want to fight for, yes. But let's also still stand with other groups too. And standing with other groups doesn't mean walking away from our own issues that we need to fight for. Shame on you, Ron DeSantis. What am I kidding? He ain't got no shame. Like the stream, y'all. Thank you very much. I know that was heavy, but all the topics were heavy today. Let me check to see if we have any more rants. We're good on there. Kick, we're good on there. All right, let's get into the chat. Let's head on out. I'm behind, so I'm going to make this fast. All right, guys. Radical Education says nothing worse for Black America than Black Americans say that we need America. Violin says first it came for the Muslims. Yeah. Dystopian says America needs us, not the other way. Sean Miller says, wow, this is effed. Yeah. Jacqueline says there should be rules and regulations as to which groups can or should be designated as terrorist groups. It shouldn't be for just one person or group of people to arbitrarily decide. Agreed. Problem is that this is how our government operates. Edward says, funny how U.S. politicians never classify the IDF as terrorists or their genocide on Gaza. They always talk about Muslims. Absolutely. Yep. The Wombat says, I'll tell you something interesting, JB. CAIR in 2014 was called a terror organization by the UAE for the same reasons of DeSantis. Doesn't make any sense, especially since CAIR's work speaks for itself. Let me see. Sean says, DeSantis feeding his own Floridians to the Gators. F him. Yeah. Edward says, what a country we live in where organizations like CAIR wants to help people, but the U.S. government don't want it. All in Same says, separates the genociders from the helpers. Yep, absolutely. Jeanette says, FYI, I would have been plugging my ears too, but not for the reason pro-genociders do. I have sensory issues, including some voices and megaphones. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. All right. So, guys, got to get going. But be sure to check out on Thursday the premiere of my second episode on my channel. I hope you guys are able to tune in to that. I'm very excited for the second episode. It's going to be a really good one. Let me make sure I have it here so you guys can subscribe. But yes, I will have that coming in at Thursday at 11 a.m. So if you guys would like to, you guys can all subscribe, and then you guys will get the bell notification. If you click the bell notification, you guys can get notified for when it comes and premieres. So you guys have that. So right now I'm at 114 subscribers, which I'm very excited for. So I've already passed the 100 subscriber mark. So I am very excited for that. And so if you guys would like to, you guys can subscribe to my new channel. And I deeply appreciate you guys' support there as I grow, so that channel can actually get monetized. And once that channel gets monetized, then I can be in a little bit of a better position. So it's all good in the neighborhood. All right, guys, gotta go. Thank you so very much for tuning in. I'd like to thank Mr. Blake Ashby for joining in to have this lively and spirited discussion. Also, I would like to say that look out for what the U.S. is going to be doing next. When it comes to these hate groups rising here in the United States, just know that the United States is taking a lackadaisical approach when it comes to these, because they actually kind of need them to grow so that they can create more further unrest and division among the working class. And also, please make sure to have some solidarity with these groups who are pushing for civil rights among many different groups here in the United States. Because ultimately, if they come after one, that means that we're next. So please continue to do that and join mutual aid groups within your area so that we can continue to build power among the workers and just the regular folks like you and me. Okay. So everybody, time for me to go. It's hard. It's so hard to say goodbye. But I will see you guys in the next one. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Do all the things if you got them. I love you guys for watching, and I love you guys for being here, and I love you for being you. Mwah. Forehead kisses. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Good night. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you'd like to see any more, you can